Hello, and welcome to another edition of Gaming the System with myself, Jem, and Alex, and Alex and Matt. Today I want to talk about ecologically sound, ecologically positive games, and what impact they can have on our engagement with the climate crises and all of these issues. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you both, because we haven't done a gaming check-in for ages. So I wanted to ask you both what you are playing at the moment, and then we'll dive into the eco games. Alex.
Cool. Well, you can probably tell since the last episode where we had talked about Hogwarts Legacy, I have been playing Hogwarts Legacy pretty much since then. I am enjoying it for the most part. I've played about 47 hours now, I think, and I'm nowhere near finishing the main story because there's quite a lot to explore. It's not perfect, and I'm sure we'll probably get onto that in a future episode. But for the most part, I am enjoying it. So, spending lots of time in the Highlands and helping out lots of Scottish people with their magical problems, etc. So that's pretty much been me solidly for pretty much the last time since we had a chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you?
I've been playing the Hitman games. They are probably in my top 5 favorite games ever. Not just in terms of they are just, like the people who love a fine wine and a perfectly cooked steak. That's the feeling that permeates all of the Hitman games. And they've just released a new mode called Freelancer, where you take that, and I'll mention this later on in the episode, you take down syndicates of different kinds of crime syndicates, and the map and your target are randomized. So you have to find a way to assassinate a target, and you start the level with basically just a knife, and you have to go and do your thing. And then if you fail one or more missions, then the entire run is fucked. And I've finally, after about a week of grinding at it, managed to do it. So that was quite triumphant, yeah.
Sounds like you worked hard there. It's very satisfying when you've had to put in time into it and you achieve something when you come out the other side. Well, I've been playing 2 sort of diametrically opposed games. So I've been playing Last of Us 2. I'm very slowly plodding my way through it because it's so violent that I can't play it in front of my daughter or if my daughter's up or around. So I'm limited in the time that I can play it, but I've been enjoying that, and it's also quite fun to play it at the same time as watching the series that's out at the moment. And Matt and I have been doing little sort of takes on the series as it's gone along. So if you haven't checked those out, do. And the other game I've been playing, which is sort of an inspiration for today, is called The Wandering Village, and it's a builder game where you build your settlement on the back of a wandering bear moth giant creature from long past, and the idea is that the planet has been kind of decimated by these toxic spores that poison things, people, and other things, and so the humanity's kind of been reduced to wandering nomad clans, and your little clan happened to accidentally camp on what turned out to be the back of a giant, I think it's got like 8 legs, sort of, it's like a dinosaur type thing. And you camp on the back of it, and there's trees and there's grass and there's farming and everything, but then you can also have a sort of symbiotic relationship with the creature, called Orbu, and you can feed it, you can tell it to run, you can tell it to stop, and so there's sort of things that you might come across that you can want to go past quickly, or you want to avoid, or you want to, and you can change the direction that it goes around on the larger map. So it's quite a fun little builder game, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it actually, and it's quite chill and cute. So it's been quite a lot of fun, and it kind of segues us nicely into today's topic, which, as I said, is the idea of using computer games to raise awareness and educate people, and energize people to do something about the climate crisis. And we talk a lot about how computer games are really have a really impactful part to play in our social attitudes, in our social structures. So it might be nice to look at like how computer games are doing this. So just to put some of this into context for you guys, I didn't know very much about this issue, and I've just done a little bit of reading, and it turns out that there is in fact a UN group that's been set up to try and promote a more eco-friendly gaming industry, but also to encourage games to talk about climate and those kind of topics within their games. And this is part of the United Nations environmental program. And the organization is called Playing for the Planet, which I thought we'd quite like, because I feel like it's a bit of a play on words, like our gaming system is. And so they look at they have a group of games companies that have signed up to them to say that they will work towards featuring what they're calling green nudges in their games. So things that encourage players to maybe have a meat-free Monday, or to recycle, or buy less clothes, or whatever. So we've just lost Matt, but I'm sure he'll be coming back. So they're getting more companies to sign up to this, and they're also going to going to encourage companies to actively work towards carbon neutrality, and also to invest in offsetting. So there's quite a lot going on that I have never even heard of, and so I mean, that was going to be one of my first questions to you guys. Have you heard of Playing for the Planet? Have you heard of any of these activities and these organizations that are doing this?
No, but I think it sounds great. I'm glad it's happening. but and I hadn't heard of it at all, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, how sometimes these things can kind of move at the edge, at the fringes of things.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the companies that they're working with are mobile games companies, so that might be why it hasn't kind of, because I know, but we all do have mobile games and know people that do. I mean, it was really interesting actually. One of the things that came up when I was doing the research was that mobile games company Space Ape, when they had the forest fires in Australia, their gamers contacted them and said, "How can we help? How can we get involved?" And so Space Ape actually put a little in-game purchase where all the money went to a charity supporting the fire, all the people who were managing the fires, tackling the fires, and they raised $120,000 in 4 days, really cool. Just off the back of. And I mean, you know, we have our issues with in-app purchases and with microtransactions and all of that, but I think that was an example of it being used for positive. So yeah, I was wondering, with all of this in mind, what games you've come across that you feel would fit into a category of games either trying to educate people about the climate crisis, or trying to, and it doesn't have to just be about encouraging people to actually take actions, but yeah, just anything that you think is about this issue. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah. So there have been quite a few. I'll end up talking about Hitman quite a lot in over the course of this episode, because your targets are always the elite, the 0.01%, the wealthiest, most powerful people and corporations, because they're the ones with the most money and with the most power. So your journey through this franchise is assassinating these really the kingmakers, the people behind the scenes, the secret society at the top of everything, dictating everything. That's what your mission is in the end, to bring down. And there's a level where there's a society called the Ark Society, which is the wealthiest people coming together to look at bunkers and life extending technologies and terraforming, because they're already
I think Matt's frozen. I don't know.
thinking ahead of. Did I
We
cut
lost
out
you then, Matt.
Yeah, you did freeze for a few seconds. You're all good.
Okay, yeah. So Hitman. So again, wealthiest people in the world go, oh yeah, we're continuing to destroy the planet. That's fine. We'll just invest in our other stuff. There is the Horizon franchise, which you see a common theme. Hitman, wealthiest people on the planet and their corporations destroying the planet. Horizon, wealthiest man on the planet, destroys civilization, and the wealthiest people go into bunkers or fly off into the stars. There's Call of Duty Black Ops 3. There's a really good level set in Singapore, where it was started having annual super storms that were destroying it. And then there was a chemical leak disaster that killed 300,000 people, and now the entire country has been quarantined. So again, global warming, corporations destroying the world. Cyberpunk 2077, the most powerful organizations on the planet are corporations again, and there are wastelands in between the massive cities. Final Fantasy VII, which was probably the earliest I've ever seen anything like that, because it's the Shinra Corporation harvesting the Mako energy of the planet, and that is damaging the planet, which is what the your Avalanche group's terrorist goal is, to defeat Shinra. More positive side of things, perhaps, is in Mass Effect Andromeda. I like terraforming stuff. I'm really interested in terraforming stuff. And your goal in Mass Effect Andromeda is to use these ancient machines to terraform planets to turn them into livable spaces. And then one thing that I love is Death Stranding, where the world has basically been turned into Iceland. It's this beautiful, muted black and green landscape, and you just wander through it, and it just so peaceful. And another theme is when you let nature just, if we take us out of the equation for a while, nature blossoms, and that shows part of the education of what could be, and there's no reason we can't have that.
That's really good though to hear, because you've got some very different games to mine. I was worried we were all going to have the same games. Obviously, I put Horizon down on the top of my list because that's really obvious ties when thinking about environmental messages. I've also got a lot of smaller, like indie developed games, things like Abzu, which has got a really heavy focus on like the underwater world and like ocean life, and kind of celebrating the variety and just the beautiful things about like being in the ocean and nature and all the animals in the ocean and everything. It's and you're kind of fighting against this mysterious robotic force of darkness that I don't know whether it's alluding to environmental things, but that's the takeaway I got from it. Then there's things like Concrete Genie, which I think is very much a environmental messagey type game, because your goal is to kind of clear up wherever you are and kind of turn everything from grey, dark, horrible, dirty places into colourful, beautiful places with your magic paintbrush. And you put like magic graffiti all over everywhere, which is really nice. A lot of these have a similar sort of like very chilled vibe to them, I think, as well. It's about positive feelings and helping yourself feel relaxed and happy. I think it's very much a theme of these games. There's also, I wrote down Firewatch, potentially, is another one, because that's set in a national park. And you play a Firewatch person. So one of the people up in the Firewatch towers, and it's your job to look after the national park, which is really cool. I also wrote down potentially even Octodad, which I know is quite a tenuous link, but you could argue that also highlights how we need to look after nature a little bit more and befriend our creatures under the sea, if not technically, well, not marrying them, obviously, because that's just not good, but befriending them and thinking about them a little bit more, maybe, is the message of Octodad. And then a couple more, I wrote down Pathless, which is made by the same people who made Abzu, and that's very much about a connection to the land, particularly when thinking about Native American cultures, I believe, was the inspiration for that. And then Kena, Bridge of Spirits, or Kena, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but that's very similar to Concrete Genie. It's dark, horrible, icky stuff is taking over the land. You come in with your cute little creatures, fight some stuff, and then it turns into beautiful, colourful, lush environments full of plants and colour. So very much a colourful theme going on with a lot of my picks there. But that was my list of games that I've played that that have an ecological, environmental message, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so many games are set in a sort of post-apocalyptic setting where, which has usually been brought about by our own greed and capitalist endeavors and industrial disasters, and so I think, you know, like it's almost hard to sort of think of games that haven't got something of that in them. I mean, I was thinking of The Wandering Village, and I also thought about Horizon, and also The Last of Us, actually, because
Yeah.
that although that's not an environmental catastrophe, that, well, I suppose it kind of is, but it's not sort of overtly that. It's there is a definite thing of the world kind of coming back to itself and benefiting from the absence of humans. And you see that as you're walking around in the cities. So I think that's quite interesting. And I think, yeah, Concrete Genie, I would definitely agree with. I think the name has just escaped me. Stray.
Yes. Yeah.
The cat game Stray is really interesting because you've got you play the cat in a world that has no people in, and it's all just robots, and you don't see any green or any life for such a large chunk of that game. And I think there's sort of there's a sort of relief. The whole point is about getting out of this underground world, and so, you know, I think there's a sort of relief when you get back to the natural space. And one of the ones that I came across, I haven't played, but Civilization 6 has is like, you know, challenge the Gathering Storm, where you're basically challenged to sort of create a village or city rather that is able to deal with these kind of natural disasters and various things that are happening. So I think there's definitely a lot of games out there. I think that all the Final Fantasy games are very eco-critical in their storylines, because there's often this conflict between the natural world and another, whether it's a sort of evil spirit or a thing, and there's a lot about the balance of things and the importance of respecting the planet, and, you know, that runs through those stories almost constantly, actually, and it's not always overt, but it is almost always there. There is a real respect for the natural world. So I suppose the question is that, aside from entertaining us and sort of, I don't know, perhaps responding to and or feeding our concerns about what will happen to humanity further down the line, with the sort of post-apocalyptic style games, you know, how do you feel that computer games can be utilized to increase people's appreciation for the situation that we're currently in and the actions that need to be taken in order to prevent catastrophe? You know, how can they be used to educate and inform people?
I think there's an awful lot of scope for helping to raise awareness of things that we might not be aware of that are happening to the environment. Obviously, in loads of different ways. There's so many different formats that games come in, and different ways to play as well. You could make single player game, you could make a multiplayer game, all sorts of different things. But there's also the scope of storytelling as well. You could the world's your oyster essentially with a game. And what I think we'll probably touch on in a minute as well is that gaming, for me at least, makes learning fun. And I always enjoy learning anyway because I'm just a massive nerd. But I think gaming is it's a really great tool to use to educate people in a fun way, in a way that doesn't overly lecture, in a way that isn't boring, and the way that keeps it in our brains a little bit more, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of scope there. I can't go into specifics, obviously, but that's what I think. Definitely, I would say there is a lot of potential.
I think games in the list of games I've mentioned, and you see it similarly in TV and film. They mention global warming and climate change, but it's normally only ever one or two sentences, just so the people making it can go, oh, look, we're tying it into reality.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they make the destruction of the world a central part of the game, the propaganda that we've experienced our entire lives about where the blame should lie for things like climate change and global warming and industrialization and all of those things. Just like you said a minute ago, Jem, you said it's our greed, whereas the truth is that it isn't. It isn't the 99% greed.
No.
It's we live in the world that 0.01% makes, and that's the problem. So I find myself loving because I have such hatred and anger after learning about that's the power dynamic that has led to all the suffering in the world, it being concentrated in this teeny weeny tiny whiny group of people that you just want to and you go, there's nothing you can do to touch them. And then games like Hitman allow you to act out the fantasy of just killing all of them. And so I've been enjoying that immensely. But again, the big problem with games as a medium is that it's always about individual heroes defeating a single bad guy. But the problem is the second in command is always going to be worse than the person in charge. That happens every time. And even in Hitman, it doesn't matter when you assassinate one, another one will fill the gap. So it will take, onto union organizing, it takes all of us coming together and organizing against them to stop them. But there isn't a gameplay mechanic where it's not about heroes, and it's not very sexy going into, oh, I just went into a workplace and talked to everyone and we all came together because we're all equal. And it's hard to turn that into gameplay. So when it does mention climate change, it is very, very tentative and not very authoritative. And they blame, oh, it's just the way things are, corporations, but they don't actually lean into it in a way to actually make the player learn about how it actually works. And when they do, they make it about heroes rather than about everyone. I'm in quite an pessimistic mood at the minute, so that's where I'm coming from today.
Well, I don't think that you're wrong. I think that you've made some really, important and valid points, and I think that I environmental games that talk about the post-apocalyptic world and try and sort of just as you say, it's almost lip service to climate change or something. There's that, but that has the potential to just scare us, to just make us feel that A, it's inevitable, and B, it's going to be horrendous, and that's not very helpful either. I think what we need is a plan of action, and that may well actually have to be be careful who you vote for, as opposed to take your recycling down to the tip, and maybe that's the case. And so I think that there are two risks. I think one is that it just makes it feel completely insurmountable, and therefore people just don't engage with it because it's just too horrible. And I know this is something that like the various climate crisis organizations like Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain and groups like that, I know it's something they have struggled with. How do we get people to understand the importance of this topic without making them just want to hide in a hole, because it is a scary situation. And I think but I also think there's the almost the opposite issue where there's a potential to make it seem like it's too simple, it's too easy to fix it, or it's a simple fix, when again it is not a simple fix. It requires considerable change on all of our parts and all of our lives. So I think there are sort of I think there are problems as to how games portray it. And I also think that there's a difference between simply portraying these things in a game and using them as your setting, and making an active commentary on it, or actively educating or actively encouraging behavior change. I mean, eco-criticism is all about making about promoting actual change and actual action, as opposed to just talking about stuff.